we're gonna have friend of the show, Alyssa Mercante. I hope I'm saying your name right. Can you hear me? Hold on, let me unmute my audio. Can you hear me? All right, you're in, and I'm going. If you're ready, I'm gonna bring you up on screen.
Hell yeah!
All right, boom. Okay, let me just adjust this. We almost did it, chat. We almost did it. I got it. Don't worry about it. It's all me. It's my screen that's fucked up, not you. All right, we just have to adjust. We're gonna adjust more. Beautiful. Okay. Okay. Well, welcome on in, Alyssa. If you don't mind, Alyssa, would you give yourself a quick biography for the chat? You'll do it better than I will. I don't want to bumble it, so fumble it.
Sure. I am Alyssa Mercante. I am a Brooklyn-based freelance video game and internet culture journalist, and I write about niche internet culture things, broad things like right-wing reactionaries and how they affect gaming, Twitch streamers. I've written about the deepfake porn controversy that happened a few years ago, about stalkers, harassers, all the fun, light stuff that's really, enjoyable shit to discuss in this space.
Well, it's not about it being fun. It's about it being necessary, right?
Exactly.
And interesting. Yeah. And I want to say, if you don't know, chat, I would say that you are famous as kind of a foil for all the right-wing grifters. All the right-wing grifters of the internet hate Alyssa. Whether it's Asmongold or any of the other like enlightened centrists who just want the titties to be bigger. And don't
the titties must be bigger.
Yeah, and they don't want to have any black men in their ninja games, okay? That's the least that you could do. All right.
Yeah, it's been a year since I wrote a piece when I was still at Kotaku debunking a conspiracy theory about how there was one consulting firm that was forcibly injecting DEI into video games. And it has not, the hate has not stopped. It's just been a steady trickle. So fun.
1 second. Let me just adjust one thing.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, never mind. I already turned it on. I hit the wrong button. I was turning on your Chiron. Okay, you have a Chiron. This is how professional we are.
Look at this. This is so legit.
We have a Chirons now.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Alyssa. What I wanted to talk to you about is, how do you think the online space is changing in the environment of Trump? I feel like this is a moment where a lot of people who used to project as this, like, I'm an enlightened centrist and both sides are cringe, a lot of them are finally coming out and revealing their, what I would call far right opinions. Like, I think, and someone that I would really like to talk about, and if you don't want to, it's totally fine. We'll switch the topic, but is Asmongold himself.
Oh, yeah.
I have, just to give a little bit of a preamble, and then we can talk more. I hope you don't mind this being more conversational than journalistic interview, which is, I've known for a long time that Asmongold was kind of a far-right personality. He has this one friend of his, McConnell, I think is his name, who frequently was, would say, like, racist, neo-Nazi comments. And he also had when he first started coming up as a creator, he had a WoW character who was called like what was it, like Nordic something, and it was the same name as Andrew Breivik's WoW character. Like, he took his WoW character and named it after Andrew Breivik, who's a famous terrorist for killing a bunch of kids at a summer camp. Yep. And then putting bombs in Oslo. And detonating bombs in Oslo, and killed like 60 some people, mostly kids.
Sick.
And so you don't know, like, what he was called out for that. He said, "Oh no, it's just my edgy humor." You know what I mean? Like, imagine if I had a WoW character that was like, named after a Hamas official or something. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, do you think I would be able to say that's just edgy humor?
No, not at all. And I think the Asmongold being a centrist thing has been very clearly bullshit for even before this kind of DEI shit kicked off in the video game space, which then, the first Trump administration and presidency was built partially off the backs of Gamergate. And so this happening again and kicking up again last year, I had a feeling that we would get a second Trump presidency because of the way that things were going online. But Asman and all of them have been, the veil is diaphanous that they think is covering their right-wing tendencies. And you can just see even before he was, denigrating trans folks and saying that journalists should be, have the worst things in the world happen to them in video games. You could just see the way that his fans and followers were in his community is and how they spoke about things. And it's, the company that you keep and the community that you create is a reflection of you. So I don't think it's been surprising to anyone who has had functioning eyes and ears for the last couple of years, but it is fully mask off, as the kids would say.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I'm just proving what I said before so nobody thinks I'm just making shit up. The life of a mass murderer in World of Warcraft. This is a story from Kotaku back in 2012. And it says, Andrews Breivik smiled during court on Monday as the prosecution displayed an image of his World of Warcraft character, Anders Nordic, right? And then we have here a Asmongold video, still on the Asmongold, and Asmongold YouTube channel with 344,000 subscribers. Warlords of Draenor power leveling guide, 90 to 100 in 5 to 8 hours. And if you look up to the top left screen, the character is Anders Nordic. So not only was this like a character that he had, it was like a character that he was making part of his content.
Yep.
And so I don't think you accidentally name your WoW character the same exact name as a fascist Nazi mass shooter who killed a bunch of kids.
No, I don't think you do that on accident.
And his defense was, it's just my edgy humor. And I think when maybe you could disregard this, 10 years later, if he wasn't then saying Palestinians are a lesser race, a lesser culture. I don't care if they're genocided, right? Or if he wasn't saying, he supports mass deportations, including American permanent residents because they're protesting Israel, right? Like this is a guy who, it's not just that he did this edgy stuff in the past. It's that it's a continuum and it's continued. And you have been kind of one of his main foils, I guess. Why do you think you and Asmongold are in conflict? Because he tries to pretend that he's the, quote, most pro-woman streamer on the platform.
I mean, I wash my ass, so that automatically puts us in conflict. But no, I think it's because, and I've said this a bunch before, and it's sad that this has to be true in 2025 because it's such like a first wave pink pussy hat feminist kind of like vibe, but it is literally because I am a loud-mouthed woman who is intelligent, who doesn't back down from internet spats, who doesn't run and hide when they send me the worst shit in the world, or, I mean, I have been sent things from people that are truly horrifying, and I have had my address shared extensively on Kiwi farms and in places like that. I think I'm very visible, and I purposefully chose that once I saw that this was kicking off. I said I could stick my head in the sand and I could go the way of other women in this space, which they want and they have said I should do, or I could continue to push back against this stuff and try and combat the disinformation and the right-wing reactionary bullshit. And because I keep doing that, it's, I end up becoming news every couple of weeks, which I think is really interesting because they treat me like a very popular public figure, but most people don't know who I am.
Right. That's the other thing. One of the things I've noticed with people like Destiny or Asmongold or any of these like right-wing streamers is they say like basically if you have any kind of public, statements or a public social media profile, that makes you a, quote, public figure. Right.
Yep.
And that's not how that works. OK, you're not a public figure just because you're, you write articles or you have a Instagram account and you tweet under your name or whatever. That doesn't make you a public figure. A public figure is like a term of art referring to it's a legal term of art. And they just abuse that so that they can get away with basically committing crimes and harassing people and justifying it. Yeah.
when he does that, it trickles down to all these other smaller creators who are trying to, like those little fish that are on the sharks that eat all the shit that they don't eat.
A
Um,
remora.
yeah, thank you. I thought it was something like that. I almost said Gamora, and I was like, what the fucking Marvels?
Yeah.
That's what they're all trying to do. And when they do that, and I get angry and I get frustrated that there are, people on YouTube talking about my abortions as if they know why I had them or when I had them or even any remote detail of that. When I get frustrated and say this is not something that people should be talking about, the conversation is, well, she's a public figure. Well, she's a public figure and it's fair game. Well, she's a public figure and it's news. It's like, it's not news that I had an abortion in 2017. Like, that's not news.
Well, right. And well, I think that's part of like the larger question. Like the main problem I have with Asmongold above everything is that he is the major gaming corporation's biggest ally. He's basically the guy who protects everything that makes gaming suck. I'm, this is embarrassing to admit, but I'm a gamer. I've been playing video games since 1988. All right. That's a long time ago. Okay. And I play a lot of fucking video games throughout my life, and I like it as a hobby. Right. And the reality is that what has made gaming worse is the bigger it's gotten as a business, and the way that gaming is created now is you have Wall Street, MBAs coming into gaming as if it's selling Coca-Cola. Yep. And they do the same practices, which is what's addictive and what can we do to extract the most amount of money. So, we're talking about injecting gambling. We're, injecting like all these different tactics to make you spend more money, more DLCs, more crunch on the workers. So what should be a unity between the creators of video games, the artists that actually bring us the games, and the people that love games, people like Asmongold actually create this division between us and side with the mega corporations to attack the workers, the programmers and the developers that actually bring us the games, and side with the men who make games worse for profit. That's what Asmongold functions as within this gaming sphere. Is he helps all the big mega corporations get away with the most evil shit. Yep.
And I've said this a million times, the people like him and other people who are aping his behavior, they do go after the workers. They go after the people on the lowest rungs of the ladder who don't have the financial protections to keep themselves off of these spaces, or to keep their information private, or even to just clap back because they're scared that the company that they work for will then pull them off to the side and chastise them for telling somebody who told them that they shouldn't exist because they're trans to eat shit. And it's like, that's what they're going after the people who have not even made those decisions. And that's what's so wild too, is that the argument that many of these Gamergaters and Gamergater adjacent people make is that, they just want that good games to be made and they don't want to be given poor products. And what's so frustrating, and this is definitely something that you've discussed on a political level as well, is that there's always like a nugget and a kernel of truth that they are just fundamentally misunderstanding the larger picture and what fed into that. And you are upset because there is a perceived decrease in quality in certain games, and you are getting gamed by these companies to make more money off of you. But it's not because there's a Black person working there or because there's a trans person working there. It's because some guy who has a golden parachute when this all fails decided we must make number go up, so let's make this a live service game. And that has nothing to do with the people who are developing and coding that game.
Well, right. And like, I talked about Asmongold. He said the other day that the vast majority of political violence in this country is left wing. And that's like one of those things that's just patently ridiculous unless you're a total fucking moron. Yep. And, I posted a couple studies showing that 60% of political violence in this country is right wing and 25% is left wing. And then the other categories that the studies put out were like religious extremism and ethno-nationalism. And it's like, those are all right wing.
Those are right wing.
So it's 75-25, even at the most, fair reading of it. It's just different types of right wingers who don't think they're right wing fighting with each other. It's like, yes, the Islamist is also a conservative. He just has a different cultural conservatism that he's coming from. He's still a right winger, dumbass. And the thing is, like, when people called him out on that, he just said, well, it's common sense. I see in the media that this is, and, you know, that's right, you know, and he's kind of spreading this anti-intellectualism as well as, and that's why, you know, as well as like doing misinformation for these big corporations, right? And that's kind of why he's the perfect embodiment of American right-wing politics in this moment, which is this like ideologically incoherent, uneducated, somebody who's spreading misinformation and promoting a culture of anti-intellectualism and anti-truth in favor of what feels good.
Yeah, and peddling that this is all apolitical when it is inherently political. I mean, I just like I didn't even quote tweet him, but I screenshot this guy who's a CEO of a video game company that he's been paying for ads on X for a few months. I forget his name. It's like, it's in my tweet somewhere. I'm gonna.
If you want to send it to me, DM me, we could bring it up. You know, because I set this up so we could always look at shit because I'm weird like this.
No, that's smart. Visual learning is important.
Yes.
Hang on, I'm going to send it to you right now. Yeah, so it's this guy. I mean, his game wasn't even good, and people know that. He's the guy who made Lords of the Fallen, a game famously launched into like a fundamentally broken state. And he's been kind of doing this, oh, wait, there's like a whole resurgence of right-wing shit online. We make games, not politics. We stand for non-political and non-social agendas, no DEI in gaming content. It's like, that's a political stance. And it's people like Asvin and people like this guy who are saying things like, well, we don't want your politics in our games, which means we don't want Black people, we don't want trans people, we don't want non-binary options, we don't want gay romance options. That is a political stance. And pushing that as apolitical is their kind of MO of, we don't want politics in games, but you want your politics.
Yeah, that's kind of like something that I think a lot of people have a hard time recognizing is the main project of liberalism and neoliberalism over the last 30 years has been to kind of create this idea that the status quo is apolitical, right? And so all the things that are done that create the status quo and everything that's done to maintain the status quo, whether it's violent, whether it's legal, whether it is cultural, economic, whatever, that's all just invisible. And that's the way things are. And that's the natural way of things, right? It's a desire to kind of naturalize the conditions we have now and pretend that they just arose naturally through evolution, I guess, as opposed to part of a larger political, regime that's currently enforcing it. And the thing is, like, if you look at gaming, like when I talk about gaming early on, it was something that hobbyists were creating. It was something that people were creating because they were passionate about it. They didn't come to making video games because they were trying to make money. They came to making video games because they wanted to make games, and they had this new ability and new medium to do it and create this kind of culture around that kind of enthusiast, that kind of person that was like pushing the cutting edge of computing. And it wasn't this like cash cow to make a bunch of money, right? And it later evolved into that. And as these corporations have become more and more libertarian and profit focused, as the shareholder capitalism advanced as the kind of like philosophy of our status quo. It didn't used to be that in the 80s even. Like shareholder capitalism, it was developed, which is the idea, if you don't know, chat, that the number one goal of a company is to make money for the shareholders. That is not how it was always thought of. Even in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s in America, that is not the way companies operated. They didn't just try to make short-term profits for the shareholders. They oftentimes considered things like the workers or the vision of, the executives or creatives within the company. It was shareholder capitalism and that ideology, which is companies are only here to make as much money as they can. They have no social responsibilities, that created the gaming culture we have today, which is, as I said before, microtransactions, DLCs, crunch, releasing games that are broken, and doing things that are focused on maximizing the bottom line as opposed to creating games that are fun to play.
Yep. And the COVID played a huge role in this because there was record profits in the games industry during COVID, during lockdown time, because more people were playing games than ever before because they weren't leaving their houses or their apartments. So you had an injection of new people playing games and buying games that was not going to last once we returned to normalcy or people had to start going back to work so that your bosses could confirm that you were working for them. And they went on a hiring boom, these video game companies. They decided to push forward on a couple of really ill-advised, kind of behind the times live service game pushes, because they're still chasing that big Fortnite, pie in the sky.
Live service is about continually extracting money, right?
Exactly.
Like, they don't like the model of I sell you a $70 game and then that's all the money I get, and then I have to like make patches and like, support the game, and they don't want to do that. They want to have you constantly take your money out, pop credit card out and buy more shit.
Yeah, and once they realize that even gamers who, like, no offense, are by and large some of the stupidest people in terms of like understanding anything other than their narrow purview of the world, once they realize that even gamers were like, I don't want to buy into this live service game that's not even that good, and games started failing, like Concord or like Suicide Squad killed the Justice League, and then the COVID profits were not sustaining all the way through 2022, 2023. That's when you saw these mass layoffs in the games industry, studios shutting down, games getting canceled. And so now we're at this really crazy inflection point of there is a crisis in the video game industry. There's a crisis of creativity, there's a crisis of workers' rights, there's a crisis of ideology, and then you have gamers who have turned their consumerism into an ideology as well, who are just angry that like boobies aren't big in games anymore. And
I don't even think that's true though, because it's like even games where there are big boobies, it's like it has to be done in a certain way, right? Like the boobies have to be an object. It can't be boobies with a character who's also like assertive and is control in charge of their own worldview. It has to be these almost like playing with dolls.
Yes. I've always said that it's like they want to play with action figures. And, Stellar Blade was a perfect example of that. She was an android the main character was an android who had like very little personality, who had this absolutely absurd body type. But
it was also sexless.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Sexless, but that's what they want, because they want to fuck a doll that doesn't do anything. Like it's
well, right, because like, yeah, I mean, we could get into all sorts of like psychological shit that's happening. And like, this is kind of the problem that I was talking with some people the other day about this, about the left in particular and like men in general. And I might have a different opinion than you on this. I actually think like when women say men aren't shit, for example, they're right. Men aren't shit right now. Like they're hurting. Like they're not performing economically. They're not performing academically. They're having less sex. Fewer of them are having sex, and those that do have less. And they're more likely to be further behind in kind of life milestones. And this is there is a gender gap, right? Women are performing better than men. This is just a fact. And like I think that for the longest time, men, of course, and continue to dominate women, the men at the top, the capitalist class, and we do still have a patriarchy, and all those things are true, and there is a whole bunch of stuff that is oppressing women, but there's a lot of men that have fallen off the cliff, and there is not a path towards a good, dignified life, for most men.
No, and I've talked about this. I mean, I talked about this a little bit in my piece that I did for Rolling Stone about stalkers and Twitch streamers. Like, there is a crisis of masculinity. Young men are in a very bad spot. And I must make it very clear, they're in a bad spot because of the patriarchy. Like, men put them in a bad spot. Like, men created a society that made it so that they felt like they aren't worth anything if they aren't rich, or if they don't have a wife and kids and some sort of traditional nuclear family. That is not the fault of women or queer folks or anybody like that. But they are in a crisis, and the problem is, men all the way from the top down, like Elon Musk, and then you go a layer lower and you go to like an Asmongold, and then you go to a layer lower to the men who are trying to be like Asmongold. They all identify and they all recognize that. And what they do is, instead of giving them, solid solutions, like, I don't know, fucking therapy or going outside and meeting a woman and talking to them.
Oh, I have a better solution, which is socialist revolution. But no, in all seriousness.
Yes. Yes, no, actually, but they don't give them those solutions. They just give them more and more things to be angry about. So there's an anger churn, a consistent anger churn of Spider-Man meme pointing at all of these other things to be pissed at, black women and queer women and women who don't shave their armpits and a black guy in a Japanese game, like rather than them actually,
Who actually
having class
consciousness.
Yeah, who actually existed and was a real person.
Yeah.
Rather than them realizing that this is, they are put in this position because of a dominant class, financial class that does not give a fuck whether they live or die as long as they continue to make profit for them in some way, shape, or form. And that is like too much for their brains to handle. We can't even go near talking about that because then they call it pocket watching or something stupid when I point out that reactionary YouTubers are getting rich off of keeping young men angry.
Well, I think of Asmongold in a more complex way because, like, I think of him as kind of almost God, there's a word for this in Japan. The Japanese are advanced in this shit, but and that's what I was looking for. I can't remember it, but basically I'll describe it and maybe the chatters will tell me, which is it is almost like a protest lifestyle, which is like I'm not going to work my shitty 9 to 5 job at minimum wage. I'm not going to go to college and get a bunch of debt. It's a hikikomori. Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing everyone say,
So it's like basically like, weebs, and they're like almost, they have this permanent adolescence, right? And Asmongold, he doesn't even, he doesn't clean his room. Who is that? That's rebellion against mommy. He doesn't take a shower and wash his hair and brush his teeth. That's a rebellion against his parents. So he's kind of rejecting. He's not just rejecting, he's completely rejecting masculinity and being a man in kind of a fundamental way, right? Like, not just like, and so I think he's proudly a boy, like a man child. And that is, because, and it's like a protest, almost protest lifestyle of like, I reject being a normie. I reject the 9 to 5 and having no girlfriend and having no money and enslaving away with no prospects. If you're a mediocre person, you deserve to have a really happy life.
Yeah.
Right. But in our society, we've now created this situation where everybody but who's the excellent, they deserve shit, let alone be in here below average. They think you should die. Right.
Yep.
Let alone, and so I think they're right to like kind of feel that pressure of this kind of like accelerating fascist spiral. And then kind of and their response is a political movement of like just withdrawal.
Yeah.
But that still creates resentment. They still have the they still have the hierarchy of needs. They don't have friends, they don't have a girlfriend, they're not having sex, they're not getting social, they're not self-actualizing. They are sitting there rotting in their room, and the only thing they have as a good distraction is video games, and that's just not hitting the spot anymore.
Yep.
So you need to have an excuse.
What's so interesting, though, is like this rejection of, like adulthood is also like inherently like a countercultural, like punk and queer punk thing. Like this is something that people have done for years where they've said, well, we're not going to, fall victim to capitalism. So we live in a commune together and we all share things. Or I don't believe in a traditional nuclear family and I'm in a polyamorous relationship. Like, yes, we joke about all of this stuff. But one of I have a master's degree in literature and I focus intently on queer theory, and one of the aspects of queer theory is this atemporality, this kind of refusal to grow up, this refusal to go down the traditional heteronormative steps of you go to school, you get married, you have kids, you have a nice job, you do this and that. And it's really funny that kind of counterculture ideology is now being picked up by people who are then spewing right-wing ideology. Like it's strange to me that, and someone said this the other day, and I was like, holy shit, there's this woman who's very aggressively right-wing in video games. Her name's Melanie Mack. She spews slurs. Yeah, she spews slurs all the time, but she dresses like a punk Hot Topic kid. And someone was like, I remember when you used to dress like your personality. It's just so strange to see that being co-opted by somebody who thinks it's okay to say the F slur. And like, it's just very backwards. And I wonder if it has to do with just the immediacy of the internet and people kind of seeing these cultural like iconographies, but not understanding them. Like it's so bizarre to see that happen, and to see someone like Asmongold rejecting heteronormative life, but then spewing heteronormative talking points.
I wonder if I asked him if he thought he was a man, he would say yes. And I think he would, because I don't think he's like in his mind of like rejecting manhood.
No,
but how to put
in
this, like
practice.
I'm like almost developing this theory as we're talking, because it's like I think that he is a perfectionist about his own manhood. So he has so what I'm saying is, like, in his mind, one day he will go to the gym, and one day he will get married, and one day he will have kids, but you know the conditions are not quite right, and so he's gonna focus on, you know, this other stuff, and he just rots, right? Like the days, like he's almost procrastinating, executive dysfunction, and like because he doesn't know what to do to get it right. So he has this vision of what things should be, but he doesn't see a path of ever getting there, and so he never starts, and then he needs to find scapegoats for why he can't accomplish it. Now, Asmongold's really fascinating because there is absolutely no reason that he couldn't live the best possible life.
Oh my God, yeah, he's successful, he's rich.
He's rich, he's successful, he has a lot of followers, you know, and the world is his oyster, but yet he chooses to be surrounded by the bottom of the barrel, rotten fast food wrappers, his own filth, you know, the home that his mom raised him in when she was on government assistance.
Yep.
Right. And it's like, and he's turned against, you know, it's kind of wild to me that the guy who only could like created this career because of government assistance given to him and his family has turned to a right-wing politics of the hyper elite rich who want to destroy all those programs. Right? Who want to take them all away. And he's their biggest advocate. It's fucking crazy.
I just, like, at a certain point, I can't, like, and I've talked about this a lot too, like how much of this has to do with them. What's the split? Is it willful ignorance of your history, or is it also a media literacy issue? Is it, which one is more you know, because like the decay of like a traditional free press and like a consistent media that actually is held to a standard is the reason why these, you know, right-wing reactionaries are able to fill in the gaps with sludge and shit, which is why video game journalism and culture journalism, tech journalism is at such a strange crossroads right now. But I'm just so curious as to how much someone like him and all of the other people, because yes, he's one person, we're talking about one person, but he is so representative of a large swath of men in this country and outside of it. Like how much of this is willful ignorance of their past, their present, and how much of it is media illiteracy? Like, I'm so curious.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, you know, appreciating art is one of those things that's really fun, because even when you don't really know what's going on, you can still do it, right? Like, it's like whenever you produce a piece of art, you want novices to come in. You want people that don't have the literary references, and they don't know history, and they don't know your influences, and you know, they're kind of just reacting to the shapes and the colors and the feelings and the what's on there at face value. That's most people, you know, that's most people consuming art. It's like a great example of this for me is Starship Troopers, right? Like Starship Troopers is a film that is made to lampoon fascism and to show a, you know, post-racial fascist society, and the whole conceit of it is, what would a movie created in that universe look like?
Yep.
And that's what it is. It is.
Yep.
And so everything that's stilted, you know, the soap opera lighting, the the characters that are literally, you know, wax figures and cardboard cutouts. It's all done intentionally to lampoon this as a horrible, horrible society. And then there are certain things that kind of get through the propaganda, like at the, you know, it's clear the humans are losing the war, right? The last scene is, you know, a bunch of literal children are being press ganged into the military. And the 18-year-old jock is now the lieutenant, because everyone who had any experience was dead. All the, you know, all his mentors have died in combat, and he's like the leader now. And so you see the kind of cracks in the society, even through the propaganda piece, right? So, but you to notice that shit, you have to like pay attention and understand what's going on, and not just accept it at face value. But yet, and I'm sorry for going on so long,
you're right,
the fascists look at Starship Troopers and are like, hell yeah, I'm mobile infantry. That's so badass, the way they killed that bug.
This happened with Helldivers, the game that is essentially Starship Troopers video game.
Exactly.
Like, they completely misunderstood the entire, you know, joke satire aspect of it, and took it as like a hoorah, you know, propaganda machine. And they got angry when anybody pushed back. Like there was a Helldivers community manager that was, I think, a queer woman, and she was like, "You're welcome here, and there's gay flags you can put on here and there or something," and they freaked the fuck out. And it's like, did you not understand what this is based on? And then now they're still holding on to this as like one of their bastions of anti-woke games. And it's like, you guys are not paying attention, or you're purposefully only picking up the things that you want to. And that's what I mean about that willful ignorance or purposeful ignorance. Like how many of them are actually completely misunderstanding that when Helldivers is jokingly saying like, well, if you die in combat, like your family will be proud of you type shit. How much of them are actually completely misreading that versus looking at it and going, that doesn't serve the argument I'm trying to make, so we're just going to ignore it. Like it's so disingenuous at a certain point too, that it's like, I don't even know how you combat this. And that's one of my biggest like frustrations is like, how do you push back against this when I have taken examples of them trying to say there's trans bullets in Call of Duty and me going, I proved that this is a glitch that's not true, and them just moving on to the next thing to get angry about. It makes you want to rip your hair out.
Well, I think that what's happening is a larger political contradiction that is bubbling up in our society right now among the right wing. So there's like why Trump won and why Trump is popular and what the success of Trump is that Trump represents a certain type of downscale, non-college educated, blue collar person who's vulgar, who likes, strippers, who likes, they like the fact that he's a little bit creepy toward women. Like there's this sort of like culture. It's like Howard Stern culture, if you remember Howard Stern in the 90s, right, where he would have lesbians come on and ride sex toys on the radio. But he was at the end of the day, those guys leaned to the left politically. Maybe not all of them, right? There was a right-wing turn that's over time. The shock jocks have gone more and more right-wing. But generally in that point, up to, say, Obama, I would say those people kind of lean to the left generally. Not like leftist or anything, but just kind of downscale, vulgar, blue-collar guys, right?
Yep.
And, union guys. They, at the end of the day, were voting for Democrats a lot of the time.
Voting, 100%. Yeah.
And I think Bill Clinton was a good example of somebody who comes from that, at least visually, not really politically. He was a neoliberal, but he had that feeling of like he ate McDonald's, right? And he was a little bit chubby, and he got into this
he cheated on his wife.
He cheated on his wife, exactly. And he had these kind of like skeezy women, now that's not really, he was taking advantage of a 20-year-old when he was president. That's fucking weird. But you get my point, right?
Yes.
Like this kind of downscale vulgarity. That used to be something that and punk is part of that too, or like motorcycle culture. That stuff used to kind of lean left, but now we had like the Sons of Anarchy with anarchist, almost like counterculture shit. That stuff is all captured to the right now. Yeah. And I think that's what Trumpism is. Trumpism is this kind of like the way downscale culture, as the Democratic Party has been the party of the media literate, as the party of the hyper educated. Both you and I have a professional degree, I have a Juris Doctorate, you have a master's degree. We're very much in up here, right? There's up cerebral shit where, we're taking, fucking psychedelics and we're thinking about shit being connected. Like that is not the downscale. We used to vibe with those people, and now,
hell yeah, dude.
Right. And now it is, you have this kind of class thing that's happening and it's pulling apart. Now, the reason why I called it contradiction is they also have the white nationalist, Christian nationalist Puritans. And this is the thing that's, I think, is a weak point for the right, which is, they want it, like in Texas, they're like banning animes. They're making you put in your ID to go to porn. They want to start regulating video games. Like they're going to be, Ted Cruz, for example, wanted to ban dildos. I don't know if you know about this.
Yep.
And so I think that is the place that, a Bernie Sanders style, like where we are more, we're young men and we're more talking about their problems and talking about their issues and talking about real shit that's class based and making their life better and being open to that kind of thing. We're not going to regulate your video games. We're going to make your video games have more tits. Honestly, like if we had our way, it would have all that and more. Yeah.
The contradiction point is huge that you're saying that, because that's something that they all forget, that like I forget what shooting it was, but Trump blamed video games the last time he was
Exactly.
in office. Like he was like, it's violent video games. Trump was the first person to propose banning TikTok, and then he swept in and apparently saved it. Like, years and years ago, Fox News was obsessing over a sex scene that was like 2.5 minutes long, not even, in Mass Effect. Like this, they are completely contradict themselves. Like Trump is a womanizing skis ball that any sort of, and he has no religion. He's not religious. Anyone who thinks that this man is religious is dumber than I would think. But like he is not the religious right. He has created his own beast. And you're right. I think that's what he's managed to pull these groups that were never right wing because they didn't jive with like the, well, we just want to keep Christ in schools and God everywhere. Now he's kind of like the skeezy shock jock guy who's in WWE,
Exactly.
who's on the
Exactly.
Howard Stern show.
Exactly.
And they're like, oh, wait, I fuck with this.
Exactly.
And I'm broke and I'm upset that I'm broke and this guy's rich and he can help me get rich.
And the Democrats
I'm down.
Exactly. And there's at least the other thing is on the right wing with like Andrew Tate and those other people. Like I think a lot of left wingers is so patently stupid when you look at it that you can't see the virtues of it, and that makes you, in my opinion, a bad leftist. And like, so what is the virtue of somebody like Andrew Tate? And I'm going to compliment Andrew Tate. The answer is self-empowerment. He gives you this mythos of if you do this, this, and this, if you treat women like this, this, and this. Now his shit is bullshit and it's all wrong, but he gives you this feeling of like, I'll be in charge. I'll be the alpha male. I'll be, my will be effectuated on the world. I'll get what I want. I'll be the boss, right? And so that's self-empowering. Nobody wants to be told, okay, the reason why you suck is because this gigantic infrastructure of international capitalism that has made you that you are just a bug compared to it. You were always going to be a failure and you're hopeless.
Yep.
Like that so many leftists, kind of spread. That's our analysis, right? In a lot of cases, where problems are not your fault, it's the problem, it's the society structures. Yes. We don't give them anything to do about that.
Solution, yeah. We don't give them any solution.
So if you're dying of something, and one person says, well, you have cancer and you're going to die, and another person says, here's snake oil and it'll cure you,
yep,
you're going to reach for the snake oil every single time. So if we want to fight back against these people, I think that we actually have to have a movement that is offering them actual medicine. And we have to show them their lives actually getting better, which is the struggle, because we're not just fighting the right wing, we're also fighting liberals. Yeah,
and I've seen small scale some things like this. And ironically, one of the women, Anita Sarkeesian, who was kind of one of the central pillars of people who hated, people hated them during the first Gamergate. She created a company called Feminist Frequency. And then there was an offshoot of that I think it's called the Games and Harassment Hotline. I interviewed them a few years ago when I was doing a piece about how gaming conventions are still such hotbeds of like gross, skeevy behavior. And what they did that was really interesting was they were a hotline that people could call when they were uncomfortable, and they had trained people to talk to them about what happened. But they also had workshops with men who had been accused of sexual harassment or deviant behavior or making people uncomfortable, where they would sit down and talk to them and be like, okay, so like, this is kind of what happened, what you did, and why it wasn't fucking cool. And I think ironically that it came from a woman who has been so maligned in this space. And I don't know if many people know that she even did that. I think that's huge. And that was kind of an example of like, we can rehabilitate these people if we put in the work. And we can talk to them. It's, people like, how do you unred pill somebody? But I have not been able to find an avenue for me to effectively do that, because on all of these platforms where I have even a semblance of a voice, I'm being so aggressively drowned out by right-wing shit, and my replies are just flooded with nonsense, that I'm like, well, how do I make a difference here? Because, I don't know where to go.
Yeah,
but you're right. That's what we need. We need solution-based stuff. And we could sit here and wax poetic about how everything's fucked and it's because of late-stage capitalism and there's, we're fucking doomed. But no one is going to vote for we're fucking doomed. So how do we fix it?
I just have a quote that I pull from the prison notebooks, which is Gramsci, which is just says, it's pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will, which is like, I look at the world as it is, and I, look at things that are bad, that are going to happen, that are bad, because I can see it and I can logically analyze it. But I also realize that there are contradictions that we're facing. The system is going to shake itself apart in various ways, and we're going to have these opportunities. I mean, not all, at the time, and we're going to get another opportunity soon. Probably Trump's going to crash the economy and there's going to be some big recession and people are going to be disillusioned with Trump. And we're going to have another opportunity to propose some sort of left-wing alternative. What's happening right now is something that I've been focused on, which is increasing disillusionment with the Democrats, because the centrist Democrats that are in power, their main focus is stopping the left, right?
Yep.
Like they're not focused on stopping Trump. They're focused on keeping their power. They're keeping their neoliberal Democratic Party.
It's been like this since 2020,
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, even before that. But
2015, 20, it has been, and they know that the threat is from the left, right?
Yes.
They have Mexico. Mexico has a Jewish woman who is on the IPCC, who has a PhD, and she has an 80% approval rating. And so they're worried about a real left-wing or center-left program coming to America and that fundamentally reshaping politics. The Democrats are interested in keeping this election as close to 50-50 as they can. The Republicans are interested in achieving maximal white nationalist, fascism. And so we have to be ready for that moment of collapse, of crisis. And that's what I'm trying to prepare myself for. Create the organizations that will be the sinews and muscles, or sinews and skeleton for the muscle of the backlash to build on, and also recognize that yes, we're not going to have answers right away. Like we're going to have to eat shit for a bit because we lost.
And I mean, you've talked about this. I think you were even talking about this earlier when I was getting ready. My mother is a pretty devout Trump supporter. My parents are both former NYPD Italian Roman Catholic from Long Island. Like,
I know this archetype well.
Yes. But I distinctly remember during the 2020 campaign or like the lead up and everything, 2019, my mom was a Bernie bro.
Of course.
For like a hot minute, because she liked what he had to say. She liked that he was solution based. She liked that it wasn't about him and his identity, but it was about people. And she was super fucking into it. And then once it was Clinton, she was like, ew, I'm going Trump.
Well, I actually think, like, if you go back and study, like, people have been talking about how men have been going right wing over the last, like, young men have been going a lot more right wing over the last 5 to 10 years. And they kind of point out things like, right-wing streamers and right-wing influencers, Aiden Ross's, your Asmongold, or whatever, your Joe Rogans. And like, I think that's more of a result of the outcome, which is the smashing of the Bernie bro. Like, young men and young women were actually pretty similarly left-wing back in 2016, 2015, right? Yeah. And it was when Bernie was discredited, where which was a leftism that had a little bit of anger in it, right? And it had a little bit of like, this is your enemy. It had a friend enemy distinction. The billionaires and the millionaires are fucking you over, and we're going to get you this, this, and this, and we're going to give you free college, and we're going to get health care, we're going to stay out of these wars. And it appealed to people across the political spectrum, at least self-identified. Who knows what they act like? I think and when that was discredited by being defeated, and then aligning itself with, supporting Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, that's what it was like, okay, there is no left-wing solution. And then that's when the grifters on the right started to come into place, right?
Yeah.
That is what had happened. It wasn't men hate women and went to the right wing because they hate women. It was the left was discredited by defeat and collaboration with the unsatisfying status quo. And so therefore people went to the right because they want change. And so that's the situation we're in.
Yeah. And I mean, like, look, we saw a semblance of us, the left, attempting to take a couple of steps a little bit more towards that angry, frustrated, less holier than thou bullshit with Tim Walz, and then they fucking muzzled him.
They stepped on it.
They muzzled him. Like, they get so mad when you call them fucking weird. Call them fucking weird. Call people who are obsessed with trans folks and weird. That they're weird. And people who want video games to only be big booby doll girl. And that's fine if you want big booby doll girl game. It's the issue of them being angry that any other game type exists. That's fucking weird. And as soon as you smush that again on the left, and then you had, Kamala, who had nothing. She had nothing to run on. She had no policy that really anyone can remember. It's like, what did you expect? As soon as you had a little bit of teeth, you neutered it. And now you've got this guy who doesn't care what the fuck he says, and people think it's great. So of course he's going to win again. It's just so silly. How do we keep doing it?
Well, there's something because the centrists need the right wing because they need the right wing to be as scary as possible. And the right wing likes to be scary. That's sexy. It's sexy to be dangerous. It's sexy to be scary. It's not sexy to be cringe. It's not sexy to be weird, right? Yeah. Asmongold wants you to call him dangerous. Asmongold wants you to call him, bad. He doesn't want you to call him a fucking unwashed, freak neat guy who, hasn't taken a shower in 3 months, right? That's not what he wants you. He pretends he doesn't care, but if that's the message that, oh, go watch this guy, he never takes showers. He has a rotten rat that, whenever it starts to stink really bad because it gets in the sun, that's when he knows to wake up to start streaming. Like when that is the shit that you're showing, they don't like that. They don't. And the same way, the way they discredit the left, and they do it to me, and I'm sure they do it to you, is they try to say like, oh, these people are cringe. Look at this time when they got embarrassed. Look at this time where look how cringe they are. They never get laid or whatever the fuck. Who does? Or you are a slut or whatever.
Yes. And yeah. That's a big one. Yeah.
Because they're trying to discredit you without having to listen to what you say and put you into this box that they could just disregard. And so that's why the weird thing worked so well. Because being weird isn't sexy. Nobody wants to be weird. Being dangerous, they want to be dangerous.
So angry that I made this listen, I was at Dave and Buster's Times Square yesterday. Don't ask why, but I was there. I had a very big Coors Light, and I saw this tweet from this guy being like, reminder, we make games, not politics. And I was like, dude, this is loser behavior. Gamergate, Trumpism, the alt-right, it's loserdom. It's dork-ass loserdom. The internet made them think they weren't losers for a little bit because they all found each other. They're fucking losers. And they went off. I mean, I have trying not to look today, but it's like, Mark Kern Grums being like, Alyssa Mercante attacking a developer. It's like, dude, I called him a fucking loser. Like, this is not an attack. This is not harassment. Please look at the things that I have been showing you I have been getting for a year that you've said isn't harassment and isn't an attack. They get so angry when you just say something as simple as, this is a loser. This is loser behavior. You sitting here saying our games will never have DEI. It's a loser behavior, and you're so obviously capitulating to a group of people. He's paying for ads to say this on Twitter. It's like, you're a dork.
Why don't you show me an ad of the gameplay, bitch? Like,
yeah, dude, you can. Well, it was fucking fundamentally broken when it launched. The game was shit.
Exactly.
It was like if Dark Souls took a fucking Ambien. Like, it was not good. Like, no one liked it. And cool. So make your weird game. But this whole we make games, stop it. Like, it's so transparent, dude. But no one can see that because there's no nuance on the internet. So there's this guy who's saying we will never have woke games, and they're like, hell yeah, brother. And I do feel like I have gone mad over the last year of having to be so deeply embedded in this and having to think like them a little bit. And, it has been the strangest year of my life going through this, because it is like, how do you not see what this is actually at face value?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's really common in a lot of these right-wing spaces is more critique less than creativity. Like, if you want to have a game about the Crusades where the Crusaders are the good guys, make the fucking game. Show me what you've got, show me your badass right-wing game, and if it was good enough, I like the studying the history of the Crusades. I find that interesting. I'm a white man. I like Rome. I like thinking about Rome. Like, But I just think about it from a more in-depth perspective than just, the aesthetics of muscled, oily men like they are commonly fixated on.
Interesting.
And that's the kind of thing that's really fascinating. It's like, it doesn't really cost that much to like put out an indie game or put out a game if you really are. It's somebody like Asmongold has more than enough money. I think he has a game studio, doesn't he, chat? Wasn't there a thing or a project he was going to work with? Was there like an OTK game studio? I guess he left OTK, so maybe not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then there was also Dr. Disrespect was making a game. That didn't happen for reasons. I think just make your game. That's like all we've said before is then just make something. I mean, Mark Kern is a prime example. I don't know how much you know about this man.
Not that much, other than his very disturbing avatar on Twitter.
Yes, I describe him as, if you've seen that scene from Broad City when they're cleaning that man's apartment in their underwear so that they can afford Lil Wayne tickets. And it's Fred Armisen, and he comes out and they're like, give us our money because we want to go buy tickets. And he's like, I'm just a baby. I don't have any money. And he's like a grown man with no pants on and a sweater. That's what I am reminded of when I think of him. He has he worked in the video game industry for a chunk of time. I believe he was a middle manager. And then he started his own studio.
Was he in WoW?
Yes, he was involved with WoW, and then he very quickly with the new studio that he started, from what I understand, spent a lot of money on a lot of frivolous things, including a several $1 million West Coast Customs bus that he wanted to be like a LAN bus for this game, and paying for this huge studio that people were shooting music videos on, that they were going to do live action cutscenes for, that he essentially tanked the game, was kicked off of like the board, and then started railing against woke. And for the last 6 or 7 years, he's been raising money to make a spiritual successor to this game, and essentially just been like regurgitating the same several assets while raising several $100,000 to do this. And it's like, well, you're the one who's literally supposed to be making the anti-woke game, and it's been sitting in dev hell for 8 years because you're on Twitter until 3 o'clock in the morning by your own admission, arguing about wokeness in video games.
So you wouldn't care. I mean, it sounds to me similar to what you would do to crowdfund fraud, right? Where you just kind of like, you put up the bare minimum to keep yourself out of court. And you could just take infinite money because these people don't own equity. And like that's the kind of gaming culture we have now, which is, you know, there's so many people that are bad faith, and there's so many people that are grifting, and so many people that are stealing money. And so it becomes hard to trust anyone, which actually helps them, right?
Yes.
Because the more people are scumbags, the more people are unreliable, the more they could say everybody is that way. Everybody's a scumbag, because, you know, look at all these examples of bad people. Doesn't that make you hate people? And so they create this like beautiful world of post-truth conservatism, you know, so-called postmodern conservatism, where you know, what is true is what people believe. What, you know, and as opposed to something that we could empirically measure in the real world and like point to factual evidence and history and measurement. They don't want that. You know, and they want to live in a world where their perceptions and their instincts and their intuitions are what's true, and your intuitions or your evidence is lies and propaganda.
Yeah. And that, I think, has been the most maddening thing about all of this, is this was the facts don't care about your feelings crowd. And now they're going on, you know.
My feelings show that your facts are wrong.
Yeah,
Literally.
I mean, if anyone in chat hasn't read this, I would highly suggest reading Meme Wars. It is the book that I have been using as my main source of research for my book that I'm writing about, this like second coming of Gamergate. But it's all about how these online spaces in this post-truth world were sort of, you know, helped meme Trump into the presidency and into the White House, because it was, you can't believe anything you read online, except maybe you could believe that there are children being sold in furniture, and that the Democrats have a pedophile sex ring in the basement of a pizza place. And maybe you believe that, but you can't believe any of the facts that we're showing you, that the rich are getting richer and you're getting poorer and we're eliminating the middle class. Like that, you can't believe. And this book, like, if I was already obviously radicalized, I've been radicalized since I was able to leave my parents' house and meet other people, you know, like, but it's really scary to read this in tandem with going through like what I went through. It's bizarre, what I'm still going through. It's incredibly bizarre. And, you know, I mean, you've been through this. Anybody who's like a left-wing content creator, though, has seen some version of what happens when you push back against this shit.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, you know, when people attack me, they don't spend a lot of time talking about what I say, which is very interesting to me. Like, you know, the best debate bros of the alt center or, you know, right wing, they're not like oftentimes taking what I say and kind of responding to it. They'll try to get a clip of me, you know, speaking passionately or emotively, as opposed to like, what's Mike's argument here, and let's evaluate that to try, you know, and show the intellectual fallibility of what I say. Right? There's not much of that because they understand that they are not equipped. You know, and I think that's kind of the thing that's really started to dominate the discourse, where it's more about shapes and colors and teams. And I think this is what Elon Musk has done really well, which is he is a cringy nerd white man. And so if you're a cringy nerd white man, he's trying to be like, I'm one of you, right? So you can trust me when I get rid of your Social Security, and that I'm fighting back against the wokes and the you know, the women that won't date you. Right. And, you know, and he's like, look at how many, you know, white male children I've had. They're all born with IVF because I guess he has a mangled penis. Allegedly. Allegedly.
I have heard. Yes, I have heard about this. Yes.
So he basically sends his seed to these random libertarian Twitter accounts. And
I'm just thinking about like his sperm in a centrifuge. Like.
And it's all like boys, right? Except for his trans daughter, which made him, I guess, go insane against trans people.
Yep, that was the dissent, I believe.
Like, what am I even trying to say? Okay, what I'm trying to say is like they're trying to make this about shapes and colors and not really about material interest or ideas or anything like that.
And it's why Asman won't have Hassan on to talk about Palestinian shit. Like, it's why when I've tried to, you know, go face to face with some of these people who have made all of their content about me, they're like, well, we don't want you to come on the show and talk. We don't want to give you a platform. It's like, no. So you want to spread defamation, slander, lies, and horrific harassment about me, but I can't talk to you about what you might be saying? Why not? Because then that would humanize me. And the way that you can continue to attack people like me or attack anybody who's you know, spouting something that you don't believe in or that threatens the fucking hegemony, you know, the way that you can keep doing that is by continuously dehumanizing me. And it's exactly like what happens in, you know, obviously I'm not the same as Palestinian people because I'm a white woman from upper middle class, but that is the tactic of fascism and right-wing reactionaries. Is the dehumanization of somebody makes it a hell of a lot easier to mistreat them. And I have been turned into a caricature of who I am, because then it's easy to be like, well, she's a slut whore with a big forehead, and it can't be trusted or believed because she lies.
Yeah, and exactly. Well,
crazy.
Well, one of the things that's really interesting is like, I've been thinking about maybe proposing a piece to a few places that I was going to write, which is basically about the concept of metapolitics and the strategy. I don't know if you've heard of this before.
I don't think so.
Okay, so basically the right wing, they call their strategy metapolitics, which is they don't try to win you over with political arguments about their platform. They try to create these what they call pre-political spaces where they set up certain kind of like belief systems and assumptions and stereotypes, and then they kind of inculcate that through the culture. And then once a person has been kind of placed in these like pre-political spaces and fed these kind of right-wing assumptions and belief systems, then when they get to the political arena, they're already excluding a whole bunch of arguments because these people are not, you know, they're put in these boxes of unacceptability or annoying, you know. That's why so many of these guys call themselves centrists, right? Because if they said, I am a far-right extremist, Asmongold, and I believe in the white race is superior, has a superior culture over the Arabs, and I want to, but people would be like, what is this political fucking extremist weirdo, right? But if you set yourself up as, I'm taking in all the rational arguments from all sides, and, you know, they have agendas, and I have no agenda. It's about building that trust. But they create these kind of, you know, so-called pre-political spaces. And that's why they hate Hassan so much. Because he disrupts that, right? He, I've talked about this many times. It's like, okay, he's 6'4", he's muscular, he's good looking, he's the alpha, quote, alpha Chad that they say that you should be. But then he also is empathetic, and he pushes these left-wing beliefs, and he has fun, and he's got a lot of friends, and she shows you that, being a left-winger isn't just blue-haired cringe. It isn't just this like this red-haired woman screaming about Trump or something. You could be a normal, well-adjusted guy with a girlfriend and also believe that capitalism is fucking up gaming, right? And know, and so when they see him in those spaces, it disrupts the whole project that they're going on. So that's why they're so fixated on trying to destroy him and deplatform him, because he fucks up their game, which is, Asmongold could never compete with Hassan on intellect or looks or, gregariousness. He has to try to categorize him as like some sort of beyond the pale extremist, right?
Yeah, some terrorist sympathizer. Yeah, exactly. Of course. That's the only, And I think what's super interesting about this too is like twofold. One, what you're talking about with sort of like pre-politics and stuff. I mean, the Bannon was quoted as saying, because I don't know if chat knows about Bannon's connection to World of Warcraft.
Oh yeah, I've talked about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Talked to Nathan Grayson on here. He was here a couple weeks ago.
My boy Nathan. He literally said you can take these angry young men and you could turn them from Gamergate, and you could turn them onto Trump. And that was their strategy for the first Trump campaign, and it happened again. But what I find super interesting, and it's kind of related, but it has to do with what you were saying about blue-haired, blah, 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 bisexuals, is that this is the same jokes. This is the same, they're just recycling shit from like 2008 deep internet, like dark 8chan spaces of like the same memes, the same phrases, the same bullshit that like, I think it's really funny that a lot of people consider, and I can't speak to anyone else because I don't know them, but a lot of people consider me like, because I have had colored hair at a point in time, and I have a septum ring, and I have a ton of tattoos, that I am this sort of crazy, typical feminist caricature. And it's like, I am in some ways, but I'm also like, I have a fucked up sense of humor. Like I'm in my apartment with my friends doing, borderline shit that's stupid. And like, I play sports, and I play mostly shooter masculine video games, and I love hockey. And it's like, I don't think you think that the people that are standing against fascism are these one note things that you created on 8chan years ago. Like the crying feminist meme being used over and over again in my replies. It's just so bizarre because it's like, first of all, y'all don't have any new material. And second of all, you believe, because the people who you follow ideologically have not moved or budged really in years, that none of us have either, that the left is this sort of flat anti-sex, accusing every man of being, weird and rapey kind of like, that's not what we're like. That's not what anyone I know is like. Like I have a lot of fun, and I say fucked up shit to my friends, and we make questionable jokes, and we go out and we drink, and we go to games, and I hang out with blue collar folks and right-wing folks in spaces, and I don't get in a fight with them everywhere that I go, because it's like, I'm not going to disagree with the guy who's wearing an FDNY shirt at the sports bar. Like, let's just give him a minute to breathe. Like, it's strange that I think they think every single thing that we do has to be this sort of, well, I'm going to get in an argument with you for argument's sake because this is what I do. And I don't believe it's just exhausting because
yeah, I think I get what you're getting at, which is also just, we talk about how everybody is so much more shut in. Like, I think most of us now, the average person, if you teleported them back to 1995 and they did their same behaviors, they would be considered a shut-in loser. Like the average person now. Like we have, overall, people have less friends. They have less interactions. They spend more time at home. We spend less time going out. This is not even like a debate. This is just a fact. This is a measurable fact. And like, it doesn't surprise me that Generation Z is the least sexed generation of all time.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. So my God.
Like if you have a millennial parent, or you have, so I guess that would be alpha, but if you had like a Gen X parent or a boomer parent, You know, they had a lot more sex when they were young than the kids of today do. Even though there's Tinder, and even though there is, these casual dating apps, and it's more easy to like find a partner than ever before, theoretically. In reality, people are not making those connections. They're not having those relationships. And I think that's part of why our politics has spun off a little bit, because people are not really oriented toward their community. They're not oriented towards people in their community. They're not oriented towards building anything. We have this like international politics. I've been saying this for years now, but the old saying in politics is all politics is local. And I think that's dead. It's all politics is international. You know, whether, if you support Bernie Sanders, you probably support Lula, or, you probably support Claudia Sheinbaum, and you probably support, Jeremy Corbyn, and you probably support, like, there's all of this. There's this international progressive movement. There's an international fascist movement, ironically, a bunch of nations saying they're all the superior race or whatever. But like that is like how our politics and nationally, our politics are always nationalized, right? Yeah. Like when you go to the doors now, when you knock doors politically, people are not saying like, that pothole over on 7th is what I'm really concerned about. They're talking about the same shit that you see on Twitter. They're talking about the same shit you see on TV. Everybody's, talking about how Trump is a piece of shit, or they like Trump. It is all a national political narrative. We've lost community. And ironically, like these places like Twitter, where people get to operate anonymously, especially when it's asymmetric, right? You and I are not anonymous, right? Yeah. We have names, we have histories, we have made our mistakes and had our successes and had our failures. We're oftentimes being confronted with messages from people that are anonymous.
Yes.
Right? And they want to be intensely personal with us while remaining anonymous themselves. Right? And that kind of like behavior encourages them to feel a little bit more comfortable, because they don't have the accountability of us like looking at them, pointing the camera at them and saying, you're a virgin, you're 35 years old, and you're yelling about, WoW Classic is making changes or whatever the fuck, that is a political situation we find ourselves in. And like just to talk about the Steve Bannon real quick, I don't know how much more time you have.
I have a little more time. I'm in the middle of applying for a new apartment, but it's all sent through. So yeah, they're kicking me out of my building because they're selling it to gut reno it and further gentrify my neighborhood. This is a win and a lose. I'm not full-time employed, so obviously looking for an apartment is annoying, but it's a win because now wherever I go, my address will hopefully not be all over the internet for a little bit. So
well, okay. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Like Steve Bannon originally got into World of Warcraft to ruin it by hiring a bunch of gold farmers. Like if you go into WoW right now and you're frustrated that there's a bunch of bots that are farming every farming location, Steve Bannon is one of the main causes of that. He created a massive business with who? Goldman Sachs. 60 million investment from Goldman Sachs to do bot farming in World of Warcraft.
Yep.
And yet now Asmongold's greatest political ally is this guy, the guy that destroyed the game he supposedly made his career loving, right?
Yep.
And one thing that Steve Bannon noticed how many of these like rootless white males, and he says it right here. He says, hold on, I have a quote from him. He says, even though the business plan was a flop, Bannon became intrigued by the game's online community dynamics. And describing gamers, Bannon said, these guys, these rootless white males, had monster power. It was the pre-Reddit. It was the same guys on one of the trio of online message boards owned by IGE, Thoughtbot, who were later on Reddit, and other online message boards where the alt-right could flourish, Bannon said. So, like, basically, he ruined WoW, and then he said, oh, man, there's a lot of these, like, white males that are really pissed off and are really vulnerable. And then he immediately went to exploiting them again. He exploited your game. He exploited your pocketbook, and then he exploited your personality so he could get tax cuts for his super rich friends.
And the funniest thing as well, I love us exchanging quotes. My other book that I'm using for reference is Devil's Bargain about Bannon and Trump and the nationalist uprising. Steve Bannon just looks like a Gamergator. He looks like a loser. Roger Stone said Steve needs to be introduced to soap and water because he always looked messy. His hair was always greasy. He wore wrinkled shirts and cargo shorts and flip-flops everywhere. And he embodied that kind of person as well. So he was already like he was already a fucking gamer gator. Like he was one of them. He saw in them aspects of him, and he took those people, that anger, and he completely upended everything we know about like running a campaign and political anything, because he recognized that, look, the internet had a lot of great shit. Like the internet did bring together groups of people who would have never met. It allowed queer folks to find identity and to find support in spaces where they never would, in rural places, all of that kind of shit. But it also allowed for the people who would have, like you said earlier, in the 70s and 80s, just been the weirdo in your hometown that still lives with his mom. And everyone's like, oh, that's strange Carl. Yeah, he's a bit odd, that one. It allowed him to find all the other strange Carls around the world and get angry that they were the strange Carls and point it at somebody else. And that's why, all of these aggressive, strange, dark corners of the internet are like 8chan is the place where shooters put their fucking manifestos, because they found each other in these weird spots. They found anger, which then turned into them finding racism and fascism and xenophobia, and all just agreeing that this is what they were going to be mad at. Whereas in the 70s, this guy just would have been fucking weird, and he would have spent his life being weird, and that's it.
I think the one thing I would add on to that is that there's a lot of guys who are marginal Carls, right?
Yeah.
Which means that like maybe they could have been a Carl, but if they go out into the world and then they run into like a waitress at their diner and she kind of takes a liking to them, and then they start dating. Maybe they didn't date 15, 20 women or something, right?
Yeah.
But, they didn't have a lot of girlfriends, but they got one. And they get domesticated, and then they get, she gets them to clean, she washes the shit stains out of their underwear, and she kind of, as we say, domesticates the husband, right? Mm-hmm. That's what used to happen in like, in earlier periods. I think that's what they're kind of missing, because a lot of these Carls that they may not have been the super alpha males, they would have at least been beta males in the sense of that they mean it, which is like they found a wife, they have a couple kids, they get a decent job, they have they achieve a certain level of happiness and dignity, and that's being denied from a lot of people. And the right wingers blame 100%. Like everything but who's actually doing it, the capitalists that are ruining all the union jobs. And they make it about like queer people existing or immigrants coming in or whatever. And so like that's what I think these communities, that's the toxic nature of them, is they're turning a lot of guys who may not have been the alpha chads, but who might have been able to live a good life had they been given that opportunity to find success in their life, and turning them into, they're growing the number of guys who are Asmongold's. Yes. Right? Like it's more people that were marginal who might have fallen into that are all falling into it, because they're creating these self-fulfilling prophecies of, you're only 5'9", that's way too short. And I'm like, bitch, I'm 5'9", I never had a problem finding a girlfriend. What are you talking about?
This is like, yes, and I make jokes about short men all the time, but like I used to be married. I was married to a very short man who I met in a bar because we went out places. Like it's
exactly.
And that's something that I said when this first started, when these people were getting very angry at me and finding all of my old pictures and all my old posts and obsessing over me. I was like, these kinds of people who are angry about wokeness in video games or the titty ratio being down, they are not people who I would ever see at my coffee shop on the corner, who I would ever see at the local, who I would encounter at the park with their dog. And that is poisoning them. And what I see as well, because I have to monitor a lot of this stuff because I am in an active lawsuit, I see in a lot of these really dark corners this strange, like sort of like new Puritanism that has made its way into like incredibly reactionary right-wing corners, where they disparage the fact that I go to bars and they call me a drunk and an alcoholic because I have a social life that occasionally involves drinking. Or, one joke that I made 7 years ago about cocaine means I'm a cokehead now, because there's like this like loserdom of like anti-engaging. No friends, no like ever doing a drug ever. Like,
and again, the young generations use less drugs, even though like weed is legal, they're like using less drugs. they're drinking a lot less. Actually, the alcohol industry is in severe trouble because every year more boomers and die, and that means they're losing a lot of customers. I mean, I used to drink a lot more in the past too, because it's just the social milieu now. People don't drink as much. They just don't. And like all of that is kind of it's snowballing into more and more people are being trapped in these cycles, and then they're being told that women only care about the super alpha males, pump and dump, and then it becomes like now the new ideology is like, oh, you're gonna meet her when she's 30, when she's been run through by a whole bunch of alpha males, and then she'll settle for you and she'll never be happy. And it's like this like weird existential fear of abandonment, of rejection, of not measuring up in many ways. And it's like this toxic self-fulfilling prophecy of misery. Yeah. And that's what they're kind of selling to each other, because when you buy that, like the black pill, as they call it, it does give you something, which is it relieves your anxiety. Like
it's not you, it's everything else.
And you also don't have to wonder anymore. You're going to lose. So you could just kind of mourn and deal with that, as opposed to the uncertainty of hope. And like the reality is, most of the guys that are in these movements could easily have a girlfriend, have a good life, if they just approved a few things about themselves and put themselves out there and were willing to accept some rejection and worked on themselves. Like 90% of these guys are not the shut-in weirdos that they've now trapped themselves into becoming because of this 100%. Culture that's been created. And it's being created for the benefit of people like Steve Bannon.
Yes. And it's again, like, this is one of those things where we're like, well, then how do you get them to leave the house? How do you get them? Because like that now I'm in a position where maybe at the start of this, I would have been like, hey, I'm going to be here. Let's like meet up and chat. I'll have some people with me. We'll all talk. We can talk about all this stuff. I'm at a point now where I don't want to go put myself in those spaces because of the shit that I've been getting sent in my messages. And I'm not going to put myself out there in a way that's like, could potentially mean I'm going to get shivved by somebody who thinks I'm the reason why Halo didn't do well. Like it's tough because, and I have gone on, I went on David Jaffe's podcast, and he's a little bit more, he's kind of shock jockey in his presentation. I almost went and talked to the guys at Kick, because I was like, why not? Like, let me go out there and talk to these people who like might be
as long as it's his ambush.
Yeah. Oh, I was planning for that. And then I didn't, because I saw that Aiden had Andrew Tate on, and I was like, okay, well, now I'm not going anywhere near that. But, I have thought about going on these more centrist places and talking, but it does feel like I wouldn't be able to get a word in edgewise, or it would be an ambush. And it's like, how do we get these people to realize that you could have a very happy, fulfilled, lovely life if you actually, it's the stupidest thing to say because everyone says it, but if you actually just fucking touch grass, like if you actually left your house.
Well, and it's not, as a socialist, I will say this. I don't want to give people the impression that these problems are because of your individual failings, if you're suffering from any of these things. The reality is we have to build a working class collective movement that is going to reconfigure this society. Right. Mm-hmm. And like that is fundamentally the mission that I'm on. But also, recognizing that, people like Ethan Klein or Asmongold or any of the other content creators that make their bread and butter from scapegoating people and protecting those actually responsible. The worst thing you could do is feel pressed by them. Like I it's so funny because I've been attacked by all sorts of right wingers over the years. And I got to say, you guys don't have shooters for shit. Like you guys are fucking weak. It's, I walk around outside all the time and, nothing happens. Unpressed, unbothered, unconcerned. Because as long as I'm not on a chat room, I'm not going to run into any of you guys. And that's kind of the reality of it is. And when I try to empower other creators, that there is things they can do. Usually it involves using the police or something, to lie and like a swatting is like the biggest threat that they have because that's who they are, right? They are fundamentally little boys that are scared, and I want to help them. And I want to figure out a strategy of doing that, while also recognizing that right now they're my enemy, and enemies have to be overcome. So we're not gonna have suicidal empathy here. But I recognize that they are really people that are trapped.
Yeah,
and it is what it is.
That's been hard too, because like there are a few people who have been very aggressively in my DMs or making videos about me that are people that I genuinely fear. They are people who live in the tri-state area.
Might be different for a woman, as well.
Of course,
women get it a little worse as well.
Of course, but I am also a woman who I have. I was raised by cops. I know how to protect myself.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have protective items.
Me too.
I have protective things, but some of it has still been very scary. But then, yes, there is also that other aspect of it where, a large chunk of these people who are threatening me online or just saying horribly weird things about, my body or sex or something like that. Like, do I genuinely believe that some of these people will go to New York City and get on the subway and go to Bed-Stuy and find my apartment and knock on the door of a building that has a bunch of people living in it? Probably not. Like, I can't imagine a lot of these people on the J train. Like, so there's that aspect too, that like, I don't necessarily think that a bunch of these guys will ever come here and do
just
something.
Need one crazy though.
But you do need one crazy.
Just one crazy can ruin that.
I have been swatted. I was swatted on New Year's Day.
Of course. Yeah.
It wasn't really a SWAT. It was an attempt at a SWAT because I had cops show up at my house. But luckily, the NYPD is lazy as fuck. So it was just, two cops shining a flashlight in my window while I was ripped as shit high. And I had to be like, hey, what's up? But like, it's not.
Can't believe you smoked weed.
Yeah, I smoked weed. I smoked weed that I bought in a legal shop of weed. Yeah, I did. I did. Yeah. Shame on me. I deserve to not have a job. Definitely that. But yeah, it does seem like a lot of this is just scare tactics. And, like you were saying, you go out in public and listen, I'm also not famous. Like I have been recognized in public, not at a video game adjacent event once. Like I do not expect anybody who isn't perpetually online to know who I am at all.
Everybody's perpetually online now, though. That's the one thing. All right. Well, is there anything you want to promote? And we could spam in the chat if you guys enjoyed the conversation. I don't know if I hope you did as well.
I did. I had a blast. I knew that you and I would. I mean, we've talked before, but it was great to chat with you. And I had just had lunch with Caroline when I was in LA, and that was lovely. So it's nice to chat with you guys. I mean, no, I'm on Twitch. I occasionally stream. I do like video game and culture news, and then sometimes I play games. I have a Patreon.
What's your Twitch name again?
It's Alyssa Merc.
Okay.
And I just published a new piece in Rolling Stone that went live while we were talking about foreign-born game developers traveling to San Francisco for GDC last week, and the anxiety that they had around doing that during the Trump administration. But yeah, just keep reading my stuff. And if you ever see anyone in the comments being mean to me, block them.
Yell at them. Yeah.
Yell at them. Tell them that I'm nice. I think a lot more people who have platforms could be vocal, and obviously don't go tit for tat with people on Twitter. It's exhausting. But yeah, I am good at, I do a little bit sometimes too. I am good at my job. I'm smart. I'm capable, and I did not get into this career by sucking dick, contrary to what some people might have said or believe.
I did though.
No, I knew it.
Yeah, well, Sam Cedar, he did what he had to do. I'm just kidding. Listen, I'm just kidding.
I support sex work and sex workers, and I support people getting jobs in any way that's legal. And I support everyone having a chance to live a lovely, amazing life without having to, suck capitalist dick just to get there. So I'm actually supposed to be going and canvassing for Zoran later.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. I got
I'm jealous you guys have someone fun running.
He's fun. Yeah, it's fun. I'm excited about it.
Oh my God, is he going to face epic?
It's going to be
fight
yeah,
back, you know? So the neoliberals are not going to go down in one fight. That's for sure.
No, not in New York. No. We're gonna have to do some work, which is why I'm
Wall Street is not going to go down lightly.
No, I'm gonna put on my best normie outfit, cover as many tattoos as possible, and go knock on some doors and say hi to people. So if you live in New York City, make sure you're registered. I think it might have already passed, but make sure you vote for the person who actually gives a fuck about you.
Register anyway.
And register anyway. Thank you so much for having me to chat. I know we've been trying to do this for a little while, but it means a lot.
Anytime. Just shoot me a message and we'll try to fit you in. All right, thanks for coming on, Alyssa. I really appreciated the conversation. Everybody hit the follow button if you didn't already do it. And I'll see you all soon.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, chat. There you have it. That was Alyssa Mercante, friend of the show. Friend of the show. We had a lot of fun. I like to talk about some of these larger ideas of like somebody who was talking about how I talk about Asmongold. I think Asmongold is actually an interesting character. I don't really think of him as like an independent actor. He's more of somebody who is the result of a lot of processes, and some of them random, some of them luck. And he does embody a certain type of strain of politics that is dominating our country. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like what he says doesn't really make logical sense, but it makes a certain type of sense to a certain type of guy. And that's what I was trying to get at. Like, why do these guys think Asmongold speaks common sense? Why do these guys think that there's some truth to what he's saying about DEI and corporations? And the reality is like, the reason why so many people buy into that is they look at DEI initiatives and they could tell they're inauthentic. This is probably something we should have brought up, but I just want to say it. So like when a company puts a bunch of like black women on side of a poster, it's an inauthentic pandering, right? And people kind of figure that out and they sense it and they go, okay, if they're doing this type of shit, there must be an agenda. Right? And it's not very complicated. The agenda is to make money to sell more video games to black women. Because, you know, white men who play video games is pretty tapped out. But there's plenty of black women who don't yet play video games. And so if we can create a new customer, we can make the stonk go up. So these DEI initiatives were about making more money for the corporations by expanding the number of people that play video games. It's not like some big conspiracy. It's very straightforward. They're trying to get more people that don't currently play video games to play their game. And, you know, people like Asmongold, they see that and they sense the inauthenticity. And instead of like confronting the system that we have and the problems with it, because that seems impossible, they confront those people that are being used as tokens and use them as scapegoats. And they make everything worse.